And I'm like, God, you did it again. Candace and Amber and Tiffany are going to share tonight a little bit of their testimony. So I don't know what order y'all are coming up, but I love y'all. And it has been such a pleasure watching y'all grow and become what you've become today. Amen.
I want to pray first. Lord, you are so good. I thank you for this test that you have given me, Lord, that caused this testimony. I thank you for everything that you have brought me through and what you are bringing me to, Lord. I just give you all the praise and all the glory, Lord. Shine through tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. To gamble is to play a game for money or prize or to make a risky bet on an uncertain outcome. My name is Candace Starbuck and I am 41. Most of you probably know me, and if not, you definitely know my husband, Travis. The Lord just allowed us to celebrate our 22nd year of marriage, which is a miracle. So tonight I'm going to talk about that second definition of to gamble, which means to make a risky bet on an uncertain outcome, because that is exactly what I have done with my life, most of my life. I used to think my testimony was about addiction, but it is not. It is about a holy God who watched me slowly destroy myself, and still he chased me. Still he chose mercy. Addiction was only a symptom of the darkness before I gave my life to Jesus. I did not choose addiction. I chose to get high, believing that I could control it, that I was just having fun. I would never, ever let it get too far. After all, every gambler believes that they can beat the odds. How wrong I was. Addiction crept in slowly, and before I even realized that I was addicted, I had already become a hopeless addict. But I was also a mom, a wife, a sister, a daughter, and I loved my family deeply. You see, addiction does not need you to stop loving your family. It only needs you to postpone those responsibilities. You see, later is the lie that addiction whispers to an addict, and it sounds understandable, promising even, almost responsible. I'll get help later. I'll be the mom that they deserve later. I'll give my life to God later. But later never comes. I have always loved the Lord, but I also loved my sin. It had become my companion. And instead of running to the Lord, I kept running to the thing that was killing me. Eventually, addiction took everything from me. First, it took my money, my peace, my reputation. And then it began attacking those things that I was never willing to give: my marriage, my kids, my joy, my freedom. My daughter Emily learned to question everything. Savannah learned to interrogate. TJ learned to look the other way. Caitlin learned to talk loudly so that she could be heard. And Jonathan learned to live without us. My husband and I had began to drift away from everything that we loved. And eventually, that gamble caught up with me in 2022. I had begun to get very, very sick. My body was trying to warn me, but addiction does not heed warnings. It tries to negotiate with them. You'll feel better tomorrow. Just get through today. Finally, in the early hours of January 27th, 2022, I was rushed to the hospital via ambulance, unable to breathe. By the time I arrived at the hospital, I was completely unconscious. In and out of consciousness, I remembered the doctors rushing around my bed in complete panic. In and out, in and out. And then suddenly the beeping and the whirring of the machine stopped, and everything was quiet, still, and peaceful. When I opened my eyes, I was standing inside an old farmhouse. It was not a hallucination. It was not a dream. It was more real than any place I have ever been. And I was very aware of the fact that I was supposed to be meeting with God. I looked around the room, and the only thing there was an easel and a palette of yellow paint. I don't paint. I walked over and I touched the bright yellow paint, and it was as real as you and me. Finally, I carried the easel and the paint outside to the porch of that old farmhouse. And as I began to paint, I looked up into the sky, and there he was, descending down to me in a bubble of light and color. He settled himself down on the back railing of this farmhouse porch, and I tried to look back at him, but he was much too bright. It was like trying to examine the sun through a microscope. He was so incredibly bright. So I just began to talk to him. I began asking him every question I had ever had my whole entire life. And before I could even finish those questions, the answers would form inside my mind. And all of the answers were all so perfect. He did not allow me to remember the questions or the answers, but I can tell you that all of the answers to my hows, whats, whens, and whys were all more perfect than human words could possibly explain. Finally, as I was painting a picture of a rabbit, I laughed and I said to him, "They are never going to believe I was actually having fun up here." I was talking about my husband and my kids, and in that moment I realized that I may not be going back to tell them. I lowered my paintbrush. I remember the glob of yellow paint hitting the floor of that porch, and I said to him, "I am going back to tell them, right?" And he didn't say a word, so I tried to squint my eyes real small so that I could glance back at him, but all I could see was that he shifted his weight from one side to the other. So I said, "Well, I'm going to take that as a yes," and I was back at perfect peace. I continued asking him question after question and painting and moving around that porch. He never left that porch railing, but he also never got any further from me. He and that porch railing moved right along with me. Finally, I opened my eyes back in the hospital. I was hooked to all sorts of machines and intubated so that I could breathe. And I was unable to talk due to the tube in my throat. And I did not yet know it, but the world was missing a heartbeat. My daughter, Alora Faith, had been born at 27 weeks via emergency C-section due to her blood pressure dropping from the medications given to me while the doctors were trying to save my life. She was born weighing 2 pounds and 13.5 inches long, and she was perfect. She was breathing when she was born, but when her blood pressure dropped a second time, her doctors were unable to get it back up. Mercifully, there were no drugs in her system, but not because I had done anything right. It was simply because I had been too sick to get high in the weeks prior to her birth. I will never know on this side of heaven if Alora had Emily's brilliance, Savannah's faith, TJ's strength, Caitlin's fiery personality, Jonathan's sense of humor, or if she had her daddy's blue eyes. But I do know exactly where she is, and I know that Jesus is holding her in his arms until I can hold her in my own. You would think that that would mark my turning point when I finally said enough is enough, but I did not stop at rock bottom. I crashed right through it. I ran from the Lord harder than ever. I was so mad at him. He had given me the gift of peace, the extravagant gift of being in his presence during the worst moment of my entire life. And I had the incredulous audacity to be mad at him. Lord, how lost I was. But God, he was not finished chasing me down, nor was he finished with my husband. The harder we ran, the harder he chased us. He showed up in the form of blue lights behind our car in early 2024. We were facing some pretty serious drug charges, to which we were both sentenced to complete a rehab. I searched and I searched for the perfect rehab, seeking a place that would accept us both and that would also provide a chemical comfort. I found just the place. Not only did they offer comfort in a bottle, in order for our insurance to cover such treatment, we had to come in basically loaded. Even better. That's what I thought. But God, as my husband and I were leaving in the car, loaded up, pun intended, to head off to Reynolds, Georgia, bounty hunters surrounded our car, and I was taken to jail in Edgefield, South Carolina, for not going to court. While I was there, the Lord led my husband to NBIC in Garfield, Georgia, to do an interview. I distinctly recall standing in the rec room at Edgefield Detention Center, rolling my eyes and telling him, "Have fun, I am not going." Like the saying goes, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. The Lord was speaking, and still I was refusing to listen. Then out of nowhere, a great lawyer, a very well-known lawyer in South Carolina, gets me into court, despite them telling me that I would be waiting for months. This lawyer was a gift from God. He was not a public defender, yet we had not hired him, as I had had no intentions of going to court in Edgefield. He tells me that he had gotten all of my charges dropped, most of which were felonies. He then tells me that he had had a call on my behalf, so he had agreed to take my case. Still, I was too stubborn to see the Lord in all of this. So I'm released from jail, and the very next day, less than 24 hours later, I had convinced Travis to go back to our original plan, to the original rehab, and we were back in the car, again headed for Reynolds, Georgia. There he is again, in the form of those flashing blue lights. We were pulled over for no seatbelt as we were turning into a Zaxby's parking lot. They ran our names, and guess who has a warrant for being not in Reynolds, Georgia? You guessed it, me. So back to jail I go, and back to Columbia County. Once there, I see a dear friend of mine, Shirley, and I could not believe my ears when the first thing she said to me was Garfield, Georgia. Excuse me? She says Garfield, Georgia. It's not too far, but it's far enough. I tell her, nope, no way. That's what my husband keeps saying. And she says, go with me. I knew then in that moment that the Lord had had his hand in everything leading up to that very moment. So I said, okay. The next week, we did our interviews and were both accepted. My mother-in-law once asked me why I was so determined not to come here, to which I had no good answer. And all she could say was, I guess because you were supposed to. All I know is that I had been searching for a place to hide in my shame, a place where I could mask my guilt and bury my past. But instead, I got Miss Anna and Miss Wendy. They are my leaders who refuse to lower their standards in order to comfort me. Instead, they elevated me so that I could reach them. They spoke to the woman that God created me to be long before I ever knew she existed. You see, the Lord was not looking to pacify my pain. He wanted to heal it. And that is exactly what he has been doing since I walked through the doors at his house. And somewhere along the way, I felt something inside of me began to shift. I got real honest with everyone about everything. I had to lay some things down and pick my Bible up, and I did, and I continue to do that every single day. Today, I have a job that I dearly love. I teach kids at a Christian school, and there is no worldly reason that I would qualify for such a job but God. And on top of that, after Alora's death, I was diagnosed with heart failure, to which there is no cure, and the medication to treat this condition is lifelong. However, I stand before you today completely healed and off all medications. All glory be to God. And while the Lord was restoring me at his house, he was restoring my husband here at NBIC. We are both now nearly 1 year clean. I celebrate 1 year on March the 19th and Travis on April the 4th. Our marriage, which once seemed hopeless, has been restored, and we are finally becoming the parents that our children have always deserved. And it is in no part anything that we have done. It is all him. We did not finally win. We simply quit playing the game, and Jesus has paid our debt in fully. So if you're sitting here tonight, what I want you to get from this testimony is that I am not here by accident. I am here as part of a divine strategic appointment, and so are you. Please do not take that lightly. I will close with this. Colossians 2:14 says, having canceled the charge of our legal indebtedness, which stood against us and condemned us, he has taken it away, nailing it to the cross. Thank you.
want to first say that I'm a little offended that Miss Anna would even think I have a mug shot. So, I want to start with a promise that the Lord gave us long ago before we were even knitted in our mother's womb, and that is Isaiah 41:10. For I know so do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. So my addiction started really early as a child, and my parents divorced when I was young, and I was sexually abused, and that set the tone for the people I trusted, the people I opened up to, my communication skills. Anything that I went through, I just stuffed down. I didn't discuss things, and I hung out with people who I didn't need to be with, and just followed a group that I didn't need to be around, and kind of just kept up with the next group. Well, I went to rehab for the first time when I was 16 years old and did 13 months in that rehab. Went through the Scared Straight program, and I will tell you that it's exactly like it is on TV, but mine was without the cameras. And I knew in that moment that I wasn't done. I knew that at some point in my life I would end up in prison. And so I got out of that rehab and instantly fell. I met a man who later became my husband, and found Darvocet on his table, and it ended right there. So we got married when I was 18, and we had our daughter whenever I was 19. I was way too young to be a mother. I was way too young to be a wife. I had no idea what I was doing. And our marriage didn't work out, and that's one of the worst times of my life. I didn't know where I belonged. I was feeling a void that I didn't realize at the time. I was looking for the Lord, and I filled it with everything. I wouldn't confide in people, and I just kept filling it with drugs. And I remember, in those times that I couldn't get drugs, I was withdrawing at night, tossing and turning, and chills and sickness and all the things that come with that. And I just asked, why? How do people wake up each day and not do drugs? I had no idea how people function without drugs. So we divorced, and I went to live with my sister. And I did get clean for a little bit. I don't know how. I don't remember how. But then I got back on opioids again. And I got back on that pretty bad. And then I was introduced to meth. And in my logic, I'm thinking, well, I'm getting off of these pills, and I was doing meth. Well, it took me 6 months of kicking in people's doors and running in people's houses, and I found myself sitting in the Manuel County Jail and facing 30 to 20 in prison. So I served 7 years in prison, and in that time, the Lord pursued me so hard, and He disciplined me so hard while I was in there. And I sought Him out. I was reading my Bible. I was doing everything that I could, every opportunity that I was given. And I know the Lord was there giving me these opportunities. I was able to, and I don't say this to boast, I just say this to show what the Lord did for me while I was in there, because the enemy sent me in there to take me out, but the Lord elevated me while I was in there. And I was able to become a teacher's aide. I became a fitness instructor. I started my bachelor's degree while I was in there. I was able to help people with reentry getting out. Well, June 3rd, 2020, I was released from prison, and I was riding an all-time high. I was still seeking the Lord out. I was very disciplined and working out and just staying fit, and got a really good job and making really good money. And in all those things, my pride went up. And, pride comes before the fall, and I fell. I fell really hard. So a friend introduced me to Kratom without realizing that she introduced me to it. And So she's telling me about all these new drugs and stuff, and it just clicks in me. And a week later, I went and bought this kratom, and my life was not the same. So I was able to, get past these little drug tests and do all this for a short period of time. Well, then it became drinking, and my fiance did not realize that I couldn't drink. He didn't know anything about addiction, so I would say, well, let's drink on the weekend. Well, a Friday night turned into Saturday night, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then I was hiding it from him, drinking every day. I drank from the time my feet hit the floor till the time I went to bed. And I'm going to go ahead and shame the devil and tell the truth. And I went to pick my son up from daycare one day, not realizing how much I had drank, and flipped my car not too far from here, coming home from daycare. And by the grace of God, my son is perfectly fine. Some man kicked the back glass out of my window out and pulled me out. I don't remember anything that happened. And my daughter and my son and my fiance saw me get arrested that day. And while you would think that that would change my mind, I may have stopped drinking, but I didn't stop taking the kratom. So the DUI resulted in me going to DRC, and the DRC didn't even stop me from using drugs. I just used my head and, got sneakier. I just figured out ways to pass those drug tests, and every now and then I would fail some, and Allstat would send me to jail, and you would think I would learn my lesson, but I only got a little bit slicker. Well, the last time I went to jail 4 times within that year, and it's like every time that I went in that jail and I walked out of it, I knew that was not going to be the last time. But this last time, I knew for a fact I'm done with it. I laid it down. I surrendered. I begged Allstat, please let me go to rehab, because I knew throughout that year I wanted help, but I was just too prideful to ask for it. I was too embarrassed, too ashamed, and so I actually went to another rehab that claimed to be a Christian rehab, and I stayed there 3 hours and did not feel any Jesus in that place. So I left, which is not something I do, and the Lord brought me to his house with Miss Anna and Miss Wendy. And I will say that while Jesus is the breath of life, Miss Anna and Wendy is our backbone. Like, they both keep us straight and both show us who we are capable of being. And while I've been here, like, the Lord has really healed me. I came in fully surrendered, and I know that I can't go back out there. I know that that's not the life for me. I can't survive that. And I really laid down everything that I have to heal from. Like, the Lord has really bubbled things up to the surface, and I have allowed him to have it. I've laid it at his feet and just allowing him to do his work in me. And I can say that he's allowing me to plant seeds in my family. And my son praises Jesus. My son talks about Jesus. And we are basing our family, Jesus is the foundation of our family right now. And while we still have a lot of work to do, I know that God is the God of impossible, and he can do anything. So I just, I owe it all to God. Like, I did nothing but just surrender. That's the only thing I did. I have done nothing good in my life. It's all for the glory of God. And that's all I got.
So I'm Amber, and my testimony starts, my parents divorced when I was younger, and my mama worked all the time, so I started drinking and smoking weed at a very young age. My daddy was a drug addict my entire life, all the way up until the day that he passed away. But so growing up, I never felt like I was enough for my parents. I had an older sister and a younger sister, and they were always perfect.
but I was not. So I met my husband when I was 14, and 2 months into our relationship, I ended up pregnant with our first child. By the time I graduated high school, we had 2 children. We married my first year out of high school. Me and him got married, and we still drank and smoked weed and all the things. And then it progressed to we done cocaine and ecstasy. And on my 21st birthday, we tried meth for the first time. And what started out as a occasional every other weekend thing turned into an everyday thing. He got sober 3 years ago. I did not. In 2020, I was arrested, and I ended up having to do 9 months in jail, or that's wrong. I ended up doing 90 days in jail in 2022 on aggravated assault charges. With that, I had to go to probation regularly, and I could not pass a drug test. In 3 years, I think I maybe passed 3 of them. So that landed me at either going back to jail or going to a rehab. So 2 weeks before I came to his house, I prayed for God to send me somewhere because I knew I needed help and I could not stop on my own. And I've been here, and God has truly moved in my life and moved in my kids' lives and my husband's life. And it's amazing to know that my husband sends me Bible verses during the week, and we went to church occasionally, but it wasn't a regular thing. I knew who God was, but never got a relationship until Wendy and Anna showed me how to get a relationship with God. I'm very grateful for everything that his house has done for me, and that's all I got, y'all. And I graduate from his house in 8 days.
Hey, let's give it up for them one more time, y'all. Awesome testimony. But Tiffany, I ain't know you was thugging like that, girl. You was same game and everything. I ain't know you was thugging like that. Hey, we got